First up, we will hear about the substantial developments in Schibsted's platforms for news personalization Curate during the past year. Please give a warm welcome to data scientist at Schibsted, Welander.
Right, thank you. All right, let's see. Large crowd. So I work as a data scientist in Schibsted Media in a small team called Curate that focuses on content recommendation. And I'm going to talk about personalization today and some of the insights that we have gained. So Curate is available for all Schibsted and Polaris news brands, regardless of size or reach. We are currently serving more than 70 newsrooms in terms of content recommendation, but also editorial platforms. And we have this rather large and important mission, and I think some of you from last year might recognize this, but we want to serve the right content to the right person at the right format, at the right place, at the right moment. But maybe most importantly, we want to safeguard the journalistic mission. And what we mean by that is that doing content recommendation in the news domain is a bit different. So if we compare it to social media or marketplaces, we can't just optimize on engagement and conversions, but actually we need to focus on the responsibilities of our journalists as well. But at the same time, we still want to provide the readers with content that matches their preferences and interests. So we need to support these two aspects. And we do that by supplying the editors and journalists tools that they need. So in our editorial tooling, we can ensure that the brands can fulfill their journalistic mission by distributing content and important news stories that they think is important. So by doing so, we also get a human in the loop. The benefit of that is that they know the content the best. So they are able to A/B test different teaser titles or images. They also put a news value on all of the content that is being published. But maybe most important for my part as a data scientist, they are also responsible for what content that goes into our recommendation system. So here's an overview of our front page manager, where the editors can simply put articles on the front page in seconds. And a key to success in all of this is that the newsrooms works rather closely together with Curate, so they are able to understand and also improve their content recommendation. And the focus of today will be on just that, content recommendation and maybe automation. So not generative AI this time. In summary, if we simplify it a bit, usually the editors have some manual positions in the top, where they have full manual control. The rest is automated together with Curate. But all of this is also highly optimizable and configurable, so it doesn't even need to be a front page. Right? So with this automation, it basically comes down to two things. Our journalist makes content, and we want to use that content to fill some spots on our site. And these pools of content, which includes everything from articles to various media assets, such as videos and podcasts. But since we can't display everything at once, we need a smart way to find the most engaging item at that time. So in Curate, we solve that by using something that we call algorithms, or rankers. So rankers are an algorithm that takes a list of items and goes through all of them in these subfeeds and assigns a relevant score for each one of them. And then we're able to combine the output of each ranker into a final score. And here you can see that you can weigh these rankers differently. So if, for instance, if you want a more faster paced site, you can increase the time decay a bit. But as there are multiple aspects to what makes a good engaging site, we have a bunch of different rankers to reflect these different aspects. And then by picking the one with the highest score, we can actually retrieve the one with the highest engagement. And if we repeat that process, we can retrieve the top 5, the top 10, or even 100 items in terms of recency, popularity, and exposure. Great. But as the data that we feed these algorithms comes from behavioral data, we are indirectly optimizing for our average user. And some of you might see in this recommendation that 3 out of 5 items here are related to sports, which might be a good recommendation for the majority of our users, but definitely not for all, especially not me. I'm not like a hockey fan. So why is that? So when relying on too much popularity, it turns out that the recommendation often becomes skewed toward this male interest. Right. And as you can see, most of our users, or the majority at least, from anonymous sites, is in fact male in his 50s, who doesn't necessarily have the same interest as a female in her 30s, right? So therefore, like, these users are actually indirectly optimizing their popularity. So a question that I think is a quite common one in this industry is that how can we reach these underserved user groups? And the answer to that question is personalization, where we are optimizing for each unique user regardless of their demography. So here, for instance, our first personalization ranker that we launched was called the topic ranker. It worked by analyzing the user's interest in these predefined sections such as economy, entertainment, or sports. So if the user has been overexposed to sports, that section would get a lower score. And sections that they engage with would get a higher score. So quite simple, but highly effective, especially for these polarizing topics. But there are 2 main challenges with this solution. The first one is that we have to rely on the metadata. The second one is that we don't take common interest between our users into account, as we're only looking at one user at a time. So if we take this item as an example, so it's a podcast about Taylor Swift, but it's also something related to NFL, so National Football League. But for some reason along the way, it got tagged with the section news. So even if we use our topic ranker, we can't really recommend this item to users who's either interested in Taylor Swift or the NFL, as the metadata here wasn't detailed enough. And on the other side, if we would actually make a smaller section, let's say a Taylor Swift section, that section wouldn't have enough data from a single user to do anything valuable of and make good recommendations. But we could solve that with machine learning. So by using a technique called collaborative filtering, it turns out that the only thing that we need is millions of clicks and impressions from our users. And we do have that. So with that, we are able to learn the user preferences down to the content level without the need for any sections or tags. Collaborative filtering works by kind of creating these 2 dimensions. So the user dimension and the content dimension. And when you multiply them together and sum them up, each user will get the probability of interest in all the available items. So what you're seeing behind of me here is the collaborative filtering model for Aftonbladet, where each item is a dot in this visualization. So we have taken these content embeddings or dimensions and compressed them to a 3-dimensional space just for visualization. But usually these embeddings are in the upper 10s or 100s. So here the model has actually learned what content exists and how it relates to the user's interest. And we can even apply some descriptions after training these content embeddings to see what the model has learned. So here you can see a great diversity of both like sport topics and news on a both local, national, and international level, but also these celebrity topics. So somewhere here, this Taylor Swift podcast will actually be. And the only thing that we need from the user is a couple of clicks to actually infer that interest and make a prediction. But not only that, so developing stories such as the war in Ukraine, Gaza, and even the Swedish NATO process is captured by this model, where this model is able to understand that these topics to some degree are related. But keep in mind that it's up for the newsrooms and editors to actually decide, all right, will this content be automated or not? So we have to work together with the newsrooms quite closely. And you can also see that the model groups content that is a mixture of multiple sections. So compared to the topic ranker, it's not like black and white. Like one topic can actually move into another one, and these guide sites interest change over the weeks. So currently, this is in production for multiple of our newsrooms in Schibsted. One of them is the Norwegian site Aftenposten, which is currently personalizing 66 out of 80 positions on the front page. And today I'm going to share some results and insights of one of the first tests that they did with the collaborative filtering. Quite simple setup. 50% got the control group, 50% got the challenger group. In the control group, they got the unpersonalized rankers. But keep in mind that these rankers are highly optimized over the last years. So it's a quite hard and high baseline in terms of click-through rate to beat. We also have some basic personalization features, such as on our user level, we remove items that has either been clicked or impressed, so seen too many times. The only thing that we did in the challenge group was to add this 20% of collaborative filtering. So you can imagine this final score, which I showed you in the beginning, 80% comes from unpersonalized signals, and 20% would come from this very personalized collaborative filtering signal. So the first thing that we saw was that we were able to distribute much more content, both in terms of unique impressed articles, but also diversity, so actually lifting these niches up. So one key takeaway of when doing personalization is content is king. In fact, we have been running other tests where we see that we simply run out of relevant content for the users, and hence the test will perform badly or poorly. So you need a rather large pool of both diverse and fresh content in order for this to work. But if you do have that content there, great opportunities lies ahead. So overall, we saw a 7.1% lift in CTR, which is a quite good CTR lift when you're thinking about that these rankers are already optimized. But also, if we take a closer look at the actual demographics, we can see that male 55, which is already optimized from popularity, got a good lift of 4.9%. But the highest lift were actually seen in females, and especially female 30-39, where we saw almost 14% increase in CTR. So with this, we are leaving popularity behind, as we are not only optimizing for our average user anymore. To sum it up, we are able to distribute much more niche content to our users, while still serving these underserved user groups, but still remaining to distribute the most important journalistic mission together with our editors. So it's not a binary like we're gonna automate everything. It's a collaboration with our editors and journalists. And maybe a cliffhanger for next year if we got the opportunity. So we want to optimize for teasers on the same way that we do for content. As of now, we are only optimizing in terms of popularity. We could also do that on an interest level. The same things apply for format. So maybe some users are interested in shorter, longer, or even completely different. And I think here is something where generative AI can actually help out, making different versions of the same story. A a bit different, but one of my favorites, how can we optimize for sales when we have quite few data points from a user? So here we're going into the territory of anonymous personalization, because currently the most of the personalization is done on the logged in level. All right, that's everything for me. Thanks for listening.
Perfectly 18 minutes, I have to say, Diego. Very interesting. Thank you so much. I just want to hear first, because we only have time for 1 or 2 questions. Do you have any for Jacob? No. I'm just going to ask, because you have so many different media branches at Schibsted. How do they use these differently? How do you accommodate all of them?
It's very differently. So some of them only use the editorial tool, while most of them are also using the content recommendation. But it's this collaboration where we actually invite the newsrooms to work quite closely together with us. So often we have like a forum where we discuss best practices and these things as well. But it differs quite a lot how they actually apply our tools.
And then Casper next to me, he came with a quite interesting comment. He said that this would actually be an argument for what do you call it? Massive amounts of content, for producing a lot.
Yes, that's correct. So with this generative AI, it will be just more content, and it's going to be a content overflow, basically. So you need a good recommender systems regardless. Yes.
Yeah, but you also said that you were running out of content, that you needed more new.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. If you have questions for Jacob, please find him down here. Thank you.